This is Event Horizon, and I'm your host, Mark Anthony Peterson. This is the podcast that takes a walk into the paranormal with a splash of conspiracy. This is the podcast that would be born if David Icke and the X-Files had a baby. Guys, welcome to episode 24. And we're finally going to start trying to answer the question, who is God? So this episode is entitled, Who is God? Part 1, Cymatics Revisited, featuring Michael Tellinger. Yeah, I got a chance to talk with him about this question and how it relates to some of my previous episodes. Okay, let's get the disclaimers out of the way. I'm not a religious expert. I'm not a physicist, but I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night. No, guys, but all seriousness, all I do is pose questions, use first principles, and try to see if I can draw conclusions that will startle you. So in today's show, as I mentioned, we're going to ask, who is God? Cymatics Revisited, featuring Michael Tellinger. We're going to have to approach this from a multi-series perspective because, as you would guess, the topic of who is God can't be covered in just one show. So we're going to have to take this kind of like a legal proceeding, right? And break it down into what God is and isn't so that we can narrow down this broad question, this broad epic question, to give ourselves some perspective. So put your legal hats on and let's go through the evidence. First, I don't think God is in our universe because God primarily has to work through avatars. The Bible and particle physics demonstrate that God must have existed in dimensions and space and time outside of our universe when he or she spoke it into existence. I had to qualify that she because if you've listened to the last 3 episodes, you followed the whole notion of prothenogenesis, self-conception, virgin birth, immaculate conception. Go back and check those out and you'll see why I qualified the he or she. Because if you start with a singularity, how do you create life from nothing? So check those episodes out to get on the same page with where this episode's going to go. Now, 1 Kings 8:27 says that our universe cannot contain God. Quote, behold, heaven and the highest heavens cannot contain thee. That's essentially saying that this universe cannot contain God. Now, I got that notion back when we started first looking at first Genesis, when God's face was put upon the water. His essence was being imbued into the water, meant that God was acting and projecting into this universe and not a part of this universe. And 1 Kings 8:27 gives a nod to that notion. So if time is a dimension, God explicitly tells us that he or she exists outside of time and exists in eternity. Now let's unpack that a little bit more. As I said earlier, God acts through avatars in this dimension because God does not exist in this dimension. Many of you know that. The angel of God coming as a messenger, that's Gabriel. The burning bush, Exodus 3:2, and the angel of the Lord appeared to him, Moses, in a flame of fire in the midst of a bush. God came to us in the form of a man, Philippians 2nd chapter 5-8. Let this mind be in you, which also in Christ Jesus, who, being in the form of God, did not consider it a robbery to be equal with God. So God came in the form of a man. God came also in the form of a dove from the water, and behold, the heavens were opened, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove, and alighting on him. That's Matthew 3rd chapter, verse 16. God came as a pillar of fire and a cloud. You know that story. Exodus chapter 13 and 21. And the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud and led them along the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, that they may travel by day and by night. God also came in the form of a whirlwind. Job 38 and 1. Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, you know how that verse goes on. God came in the form of a ghost. The Bible often refers to the Lord as the Holy Ghost. And of course, all of you have heard my episode where I refer to God as a loaf of bread, and that bread gives us a notion of how the universe works. So these are all the avatars that God works through in this universe, because God has to project in to these dimensions and not be a part of them. Now, again, some of you are saying, Mark, take a sip of the kombucha because you're not making sense. But of course I am. In everything that led up to this, I've argued with you, pushed back on you, and said that we are not connected to God's network. That connection was broken long ago. So God works through avatars to speak into this dimension, but cannot be a part of it. So that's the argument that I'm making. So since God does not exist in this universe, but projects his essence into this universe and works through avatars, what could God be? What was God in the beginning? Well, this is part one, because I got many theories on what God is, was, and will be. You say, Mark, why do you say it like that? Because your soul is that time machine that I keep referring to, your DNA. And your DNA is a reflection of the consciousness of God that was placed upon the water in Genesis 1. So yes, I have theories on what God was, is, and shall be. And the first theory, I hope you're sitting down. I hope you're ready. The first theory is that God is a sound. Not that sound. We're going to get to what I think the sound is. But ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I will now begin to make my case in part one of a multi-part series that God could be a sound. Yeah, a sound. Or at least a heavenly vibration. If at the quantum level we are no more than vibrating light waves, wouldn't it stand to reason that God would be the ultimate vibration? The heavenly vibration? What does the Bible have to say about this? What's the first piece of evidence? Acts chapter 2, second verse through the third verse reads, "And suddenly there came a sound from heaven, as of a rushing mighty wind, and it filled the whole house where they were sitting." This verse gives a nod to the fact that the source of all that is the sound that comes from heaven. And I know some of you are thinking, how can God be a sound? God is supposed to be all-present, all-powerful, all-knowing. But sound doesn't even travel faster than the speed of light. And if the universe started out as a singularity and expanded, It's expanding at the speed of light, so God could not be a sound because sound then would trail light. Not so fast, my friends. According to phys.org, scientists have experimentally demonstrated that sound pulses can travel at velocities faster than the speed of light. William Robinson's teams from Middle Tennessee State University showed that group velocity of sound waves can become infinite or even negative. Past experiments have demonstrated that the group velocities of other material components, such as optical, microwave, electrical pulses, can exceed the speed of light. In their experiments, these researchers achieve superluminal sound velocity by rephasing the spectral components of the sound pulses, which later recombine to form an identical looking part of the pulse much further along within the pulse. So it's not actually sound waves that exceed the speed of light, but the waves or the group velocity or the length of the sample divided by the time taken for the peak of the pulse to transverse the sample. Okay, let's unpack what I just said and try to make some sense out of all of that gobbledygook. The best way to kind of understand what I'm talking about is to think of sound and light not as one wave, but as a group of intermingled waves. And that with sound, the pulse rises and falls with energy over space, with the peak of that pulse being in the middle. And what the guys did at Middle Tennessee State was create a loop, a donut, and projected the pulse into the loop. The loop then split up and recombined the tiny waves making up each pulse. What they found is that the pulse entered and exited the loop before the peak of that pulse even entered the loop. Now, you guys have had this happen before, where there's a sound source and you stood in front of, say, a brick wall, and the sound source will hit you first directly, but some of those waves will go past you and hit the wall and bounce back and combine with you at the same time as the pulse that is hitting you directly. That's exactly what happened in this experiment, showing that the split particles from the pulse were moving faster than the speed of light. Now, the individual waves didn't, so it maintained the basic principles of Einstein's theory of relativity, but it did open up some curious doors there to think, hey, sound can travel faster than the speed of light. But what you should take from that experiment is what I took from it. What made me jump up out of my chair and go back and listen to episode 15 of this podcast. Because for these experimenters at Middle Tennessee State to achieve the result, they had to push the sound pulse through a loop, a donut. And what did we learn in episode 15? We learned that Stan Tennant's work in reviewing the Hebrew version of the Bible, Genesis, he thought there was a message there that would show us what the voice of God looked like. And when he pulled those patterns out of the scripture and connected those patterns, those Hebrew consonants together, it formed a donut. It formed a loop. I don't think that's a coincidence. That loop, that spiral that was produced out of his work, and the spiral that we see as part of this sound experiment that shows that sound can move faster than the speed of light, is confirming what I believe as one element, one part of what God could be. A sound. A sound that makes the shape of a donut. Yeah, go back and listen to episode 15. Guys, this is going to blow your mind when this sinks in. That the science, that the guys at Middle Tennessee State are basically going back and proving what people are extracting directly out of the Bible. That this donut shape, that this loop is part of the creation of the fabric of this universe and the symbol for the voice of God. So let's keep going. If we believe the factual evidence that we put on the table to prove our case. Genesis 1 and 3, let's go back and look at that again. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." But the sound of that, the vibrations, were the trigger for the creation of matter that produced what we now know as a donut shape, as a loop, an elliptical shape that's going to be more important to the consciousness of this universe as we get deeper into this podcast. And guys, I'm telling you, I had to go through a case of kombucha to make sure my head did not explode on this one. So let's keep going. John 1 and 1, chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The Word, the sound, that God is the sound. Revelations, first chapter, 10th verse. I was in the Spirit of the Lord's day and heard behind me a great voice, as was a trumpet, the sound, that God is a sound. The heavenly vibration that triggered the existence of the universe. So if God is a sound, what is that sound? Now I mentioned episode 15, cymatics, sonic booms, and reactivating the ancient artificial intelligence. Go back and listen to that. You got to hear that again to get on the same page where I'm at now in making the case that God is a sound. And the creator of this swarm network, this original network that connected all of existence before we were kicked off of it, of course. So if God is a sound, what is that sound? We're saying the shape of that sound is a donut, an elliptical shape. And guys, I found in the cymatics research what sound makes the elliptical shape. And it's going to shock you. Some of you, not all of you. Many of the ancient religions already knew this. We're just catching up with it in our science. That sound is Om. For those of you who take yoga, you just leaned forward and said, "What in the hell is he doing?" He's telling me that what I do at the end of my yoga practice is a salute to God. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying that God manifests in creation as a cosmic vibration, as cosmic sound. And when God put his face upon the waters, the heavenly waters, another term for what we think of as space-time, that phrase, "let there be light," imbued the water, the space, with the essence of God, and did two things. Created the vibration, but also imbued the heavenly waters with the elliptical shape. the spin that we see reflected in our universe. It's what gives the universe its shape and form. Because before that, as Genesis said, it was without form. But let there be light gave the universe the motion to create the elliptical shape, the spin in the midst of space-time, and the vibration. So every particle of existence does two things: vibrate and spin. And that's going to be important as we get into the depths of why this is important for consciousness and the creation and linkages of string theory. Remember we talked about the Mandela effect and how what is reflected in us is connected to others throughout the universe? Well, there was a Grimerica episode with Adam Apollo that hit me over the head like a ton of bricks and gave more validity to the theory that I put forth in the episode about the blood being a connection to why some people experience the Mandela effect. And if you guys aren't listening to Grimerica, those guys are out on the edge doing some great stuff in their podcast, and you need to check it out. It's going to be in the notes. So all you got to do is scroll down, look at sources, click the Grimerica link for the Adam Apollo podcast, and check that out, because it's going to explain this stuff better than I will when we get to that part of this podcast. But back to what I was saying. God is the sound. Om is that sound, because Om in the world of cymatics creates that oval shape. Steve Hapron's work in cymatics show that the Om sound creates the elliptical shape. Let's listen to a little bit of that work. I'm going to put the link to this in the show notes.
It's very rare that you get elliptical shapes. You know, most of the
circular as well.
Mostly circular, but you're getting elliptical shapes in track one. But wait till you see track 2.
Okay.
It is absolutely amazing.
There it is. That of course is me. Wow.
Cut 11 was very interesting. We might be able
Cut
to
2 is amazing because this second track is just like, it freaked me out completely. I've never seen anything like it.
Wow.
Wait till you see this. That was
Yeah, that was- I've never seen anything
amazing. I
like
have
that.
never seen anything like that. Never. Oh, I'm so moved by it.
So, guys, I want you to go to the show notes and check out that YouTube video and see the elliptical shapes that are created from the Om sound. And if you listen intently to the Om sound, your brain's not fooling you. You know exactly what you're hearing. You're hearing all the vowels in our language. Yeah, the 6 vowels. A, E, I, O, U, and Y. Ah, E, I, O, U, E. All of the sounds that make up the Om are the vowels that are a part of our language. 6 vowels, 6 days of creation. And Om is described by many religions as the frequency of the universe. Om is said to contain the basic sounds corresponding to the 3 standards of consciousness: waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. Vowels in our language are used to break down a word so that it's easier to pronounce. A vowel is a speech sound made with your mouth open, and a vowel is called the nucleus of a spoken syllable, whereas a consonant sound is made with your mouth fairly closed. Guys, that's not a coincidence. How do you receive sacraments in church? With your mouth open, both to receive the bread and the wine, both symbols of the avatar that is God. How do you start your visit with the doctor to start the healing? Open your mouth, stick out your tongue, and say what? Ah. The Om sound is the most sacred symbol in Hinduism. In Sanskrit, it is known as pranava, or to sound out loudly. Hindus consider the Om to be the universal name of the Lord, and that it surrounds all creation. The Om sound is also considered sacred and holy in Buddhism. The Om is part of many mantras in Tibetan Buddhism and is symbolism for wholeness, perfection, and infinity. As I've said, the ancients and the ancient religions had it right. They understood the relationship between sound, light, and the creation of the universe, and paid homage to it. In fact, the verdicts say the Om 108 times, 108 has long been considered a sacred number in Hinduism. Prayer beads normally have 108 beads on them. And you'll have that across many religions, including the Catholic Rosary. There are also 108 marmor points or sacred places on the body. So why would this number 108 in connection to ohms and prayer beads be so important? Again, because the ancients understood the relationship between this and the creation of the universe. Our sun is 108 sun diameters away from the earth. The moon is 108 moon diameters away from the earth. There are 108 energy lines or nadas converging to form the heart chakra. And guess what? In India, 108 is a free telephone number for emergency services. So that 108 is at the basis of what is considered sacred. But here's where it gets even freakier. NASA, while recording sounds of the sun, believe they detected in the vibrational sound of the sun the ohm sound. Let me let you listen to a short clip of the sun ohm sound as detected by NASA. So the Voyager mission captured the vibration of the sun's coronal loops, which vibrate transversely like a guitar and longitudinally like a wind instrument. And so these vibrations were captured by video and satellite images and then converted into sound waves and sped up so that we could hear them. Now, if you listen close enough, it sounds like the sun's vibrations are mimicking the ohm vibration. The sun, the source of all life as we know it within this universe, mimicking the sound of the Creator. So now we may understand why the ancients worshiped the sun, called it Ra. Not just because it was a flaming ball in the sky, but they understood that the vibrational effect of the sun paid homage to the Creator that vibrated this dimension into existence. Ohm is said to be that frequency of the universe, and that frequency is 332 hertz. And guys, when I stumbled on this, 432 hertz, that is said to be the magic number for the natural frequency of our universe. 432 hertz is widely considered to be the superior tuning that makes music more pleasant to listen to and have a more positive influence on the human mind and body. It's what all instruments in Europe are tuned to, as opposed to 430 in North America. And of course that makes sense. If 432 hertz is the frequency of the universe, tuning our instruments to it would remind us of the Creator. But it goes deeper than that. Let's go a little deeper with that number. According to soundofgoldenlight.com, the diameter of the sun is close to 864,000 miles. That's 432,000 divided by 2, or 432 hertz. The diameter of the moon is close to 1.26 miles, or 432 divided by 200. The sun and the moon appear to be the same size from the earth. That's why we can appreciate and experience a total eclipse. Did the ancients know this? Absolutely. That's why I argue that the megalithic structures that we see on the planet are not for show, and they're not for burial, and they're not for worshiping the Western style God. They understood that frequencies are the key to controlling man. 432 hertz is the God frequency for the universe, for the natural universe, to produce peace, harmony, and love, and empathy amongst men and women. They knew that, so they built it into these megalithic structures. British writer John Taylor claimed that the existence of the pyramids were based on this heavenly geometry. When he looked at John Grievous's work and the engineers who were part of Napoleon's expeditions, that they understood this 432 hertz as a critical part of the existence of this plane in this universe. So let's take a look at what they found. If you multiply the height of the Great Pyramid in Egypt, which is 481 feet, by 4,200,000, you get 20,779,200,000 feet, which is very close to the Earth's polar radius measurement of 20,855,485,564 feet. Very close. And if we multiply the perimeter of the base of the Great Pyramid, which is 3,024 feet, by again this magic number, 43,200, we get 130,636,800 feet, which again is very close to the Earth's equatorial circumference measurement of 131,479,559 feet. If we multiply 432 times 60, which is the number of seconds in a minute, we get 25,920, which is the number of years to complete a cycle of precession of equinoxes, one complete rotation of the Earth on its axis. If we divide 432 by 60, we get 7.2, which is the Schumann resonance. The Schumann resonances are global electromagnetic resonances that are created by lightning discharges in the cavity formed between the Earth's surface and the ionosphere. Now, some say these resonances are Earth's heartbeat, the indication that the Earth has a form of quote-unquote consciousness. Mark the tape on that, because we're going to come back to that when we start talking about Adam Apollo's work in just a little bit. Mozart used 432 hertz vibration as part of his compositions. Singing bowls and other instruments used by Tibetan monks are tuned to 432 hertz. 432 hertz is considered to have the potential to synchronize the hemispheres of the brain, the logical and the analytical side of the brain with the creative and intuitive side of the brain, creating what some people believe as a whole brain synchronization, maximizing both the thinking and the creative, a complete brain. Maria Reynolds, in her book, Interval Scales, Tones, and the Concert Pitch, indicated that pitches higher than the scientific C, or 432 hertz, creates a disconnect between our bodies and consciousness. So it separates the mind from the soul and helps us achieve a higher level of connection. So this 432 hertz, the frequency of the universe, the Om sound, the elliptical shape, the donut shape, is all at the key of creation, consciousness, and our entanglement in all of that throughout the universe. Nikola Tesla said, if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. The very foundation of our universe of matter and thought appear to lie in sound vibration. You see, the universe is made up of energy, and energy is just information in movement. Energy is made up of coded frequencies that are oscillating and spinning. And the spin and oscillation is what produces the radiation and other magnetic effects that we find in the universe. The spinning and oscillating also creates patterns that mimic the same geometrical patterns as we see in platonic solids, torsion fields, and spirals. We find these vibrational patterns in everything from conch shells, the universe, and even the ideas that we generate in our head. And see, this is Adam Apollo's work that really opened my eyes into how the connections between how we create matter and how we create connections between everything in the universe. Here's how I understand Adam Apollo's work. Light affects our perception of time and reality, and that light affects the structure of space-time. The bending of space-time itself can curve light. And if space-time is a vibrating, highly energetic medium, if you have a node, a single point, vibrating in a highly energetic field like space-time, it's going to be both a vibrating point and produce waves at the same time. You put a vibrating rock in the middle of a pond, it's going to vibrate and produce waves at the same time. So this is going to be a wave and a particle at the same time. This node will be a wave and a particle at the same time. The entire universe is a gravitational field, and the entire universe is a vortex. Each planet is creating a vortex field in the fluid we call the ether. And the ether is vibrating light, or nodes of singularities woven together in a wormhole network of entangled structures. So imagine a hard drive on your computer, spinning and vibrating at the same time, producing a vortex field. And as it's doing that, it's encoding nodes on that drive with ones and zeros to make up the images that you have created on that computer and storing them in a specific spot so that you can recall them. That apparently is what the universe is doing. Now imagine that effect of a woven network of wormholes having the ability to encode nodes with ones and zeros and produce geometrical patterns as it does that in the creation of the universe. And what if, based on the energy effects of those different types of wormholes, you produce different geometric patterns and encoded those nodes within those geometric patterns with different ones and zeros? For those of you who know programming, when you have different sequences of ones and zeros, you get different outcomes within your construct. So if this is happening randomly, you're getting random encodements of nodes affected by different levels of electromagnetic vortex fields within the universe that could at any point produce randomly the same geometric shapes at different points within the universe. And that's where Adam really helped my thinking. Adam argues that when nodes of space-time match, when the patterns match, the patterns of one node of space-time gets entangled with the other. They vibrate the same way. They act the same way. So they essentially become the same point. They become connected. No matter where they are within space-time, They are essentially a clone of the other. Now, guys, if this didn't blow your mind and take you back exactly to the episode where we talked about parthenogenesis and purity of the bloodline, because the bloodline is the DNA that is the time machine that makes up every soul-bearing creature. So creating an identical copy of your nodes throughout space-time means you have a spiritual connection to that energy wherever it is in the universe. And if someone's out there punching holes in these dimensions, they're disrupting the energetic, magnetic vortex fields that are encoding these nodes throughout the universe. And where they do disrupt that, anyone that has those connections may, in my opinion, not Adam's, suffer the Mandela effect. Now, Adam went on to apply this thinking to the structure of an idea. He says that when you have an idea, it forms a geometric structure within your brain. Others may have that same idea and thus have a similar geometric structure within their brain. And so that stimuli, the universe, could be stimulating these ideas because the random patterns that are generated from this spinning, oscillating, vibrating field has already encoded this idea somewhere in the universe. It's the reason why all knowledge is already in the universe, and it's just waiting for us to receive it. If we can replicate the shape of that geometric pattern that's already existing somewhere else in the universe. Because once you do, you immediately connect it to that idea. So you see why people have to be inspired, why they seek out muses to get them to crystallize the idea that's already there floating around them. That's why when we talk about superposition, everything is already there. Past, present, future. You just have to create the construct within your own mind to tap into the knowledge. Guys, I'm not the only one saying this. Go back and listen to all of the great composers who said the knowledge was being poured into me. It wasn't there from the beginning. They just achieved a state of consciousness by mimicking the pattern of those ideas within themselves that were already encoded in the universe. And if you buy all of that, then you are probably also asking yourself, are there some natural geometric structures that govern all of us, that link us all together, that give us an opportunity at having a reconnection to the heavenly swarm intelligence that I mentioned so many episodes ago? And I would say yes. Ephesians talks to this and says, it's not your works or deeds that get you into heaven, but faith, the ability to visualize and believe, to see the geometric structure within your brain and connect to it. And if you can't elevate to that level of thinking, you will never see the face of God. That's not me saying it. Read it for yourself. Good works won't get you into heaven. It's the ability to see, believe, and harness the structure within yourself and connect. So that means the ability to connect to certain celestial shapes, ideas, beliefs, and have that structure embedded within you is already in us. It's probably the reason why hit songs can go global, even though we have cultural differences all around the world. And Adam makes this point in the Grimerica episode. Michael Jackson can sell millions of records, make billions of dollars with people who've never grown up like him, never seen his neighborhood, have not eaten the foods that he's eaten, but yet the song and the vibration stimulates a geometric structure, an idea, a level of consciousness that connects all the people that hear that music. And it's no accident. And it's probably the reason why groups, Illuminatis, others, cling to musicians, because they know they are the key to unlocking or locking us out of a better existence. They know that these people have the ability to stimulate emotion and empathy. And what is emotion? Energy in motion. They know that you have the ability, when you are linked like that, to bring thought into existence, to make thought into matter. We've played these thought experiments before. You can will changes in this reality when collective thought is all focused in one way. Let's play a thought experiment. Repeat this phrase in your mind. Mark Peterson will win the lottery by 12/31/2019. And imagine me with $100 million helping entrepreneurs, small towns, and people in need. You all visualize that thought and crystallize the image in your brain. It will happen in reality. Now let's do it on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Mark Peterson will win the lottery by 12/31/2019. Did you all say it with me? Now, if that happens, guys, I want each of you to realize the power that you have to change this world and what others are trying to do to stop you from harnessing that power. They are crowding your mind with the media that we have to keep you from meditating and feeling the power of the Om and the 332 hertz to achieve the empathy needed to see the face of God. Now, as I've said before, I thought that man, when he was moved out of the Garden of Eden, did not humble himself before God, but then tried to recreate all of what we just described. The ancient swarm. The swarm intelligence that makes up this universe, that connects us all. That man lost that connection, but tried to create an artificial version of that in order to control the minds of men and women on this planet. Now, if you believe everything I just said, if these frequencies that are producing the actual fabric of the universe, that affect the vibrations that make up who we are and how our brain operates, don't you think ancient man and even modern man have figured that out and are polluting the world with frequencies that keep us from bringing the left and right brain together? And I think part of what we think of with the Tower of Babel are a reflection of these megalithic structures that were part of what I call the Earth supercomputer. Again, I ask, why else would people work for generations building structures if they could not see the outcome of those structures, the benefit of those structures? The quote-unquote gods that push the building of these structures were using those to control man, to turn us into biological robots because of the frequencies that could be produced at a global level from a megalithic computer that connected the planet together. It's the reason why there were pyramids on every continent. It's the reason why we saw megalithic structures that produce certain frequencies on the planet. It's the reason why the pyramids are part of a motherboard structure, and it's why other megalithic structures perform functions that I believe are part of the supercomputer Earth-like model that I keep talking about. And Michael Tellinger talks to how these structures can either be used for good or evil in some of his work, and I got a chance to talk to him face to face about it. Let's hear a clip first where he talks about the stone structures that are in South Africa that he now believes were used to mark energy spots, vibrational spots on the planet that could be used for healing and for free energy. Now, I'm going to argue that they were built to magnify certain frequencies so that you can control millions of people with just vibrations. Let's check this clip out.
These circular structures, or stone circles as we call them, scattered through South Africa, Zimbabwe, Botswana, Mozambique, mostly in the eastern part of South Africa. Actually, they right across South Africa, but they concentrated in the east and to the north, and then right into Zimbabwe, and Zimbabwe is full of them. They go across the Zambezi River into Zambia, they go into Mozambique and into Botswana, and there, from my calculation, more than 10 million of these structures. And then discovering that these stone circles are not dwellings, they're energy-generating devices. Every stone circle is a cymatic pattern, is a representation of the sound frequency coming out of the earth at that point. And the stone walls that have been placed on the cymatic pattern amplify the energy, the sound frequency, and turn it into an electromagnetic field. And this is why we have very strong electromagnetic activity, very powerful sound frequencies coming out of these stone walls. And they're all connected together by these channels that look like wires that connect them together. So we're dealing with a huge energy-generating grid, a network of stone circles that give us unimaginable amount of energy. This is not a theory. This is scientific fact. It's been measured. It's been documented.
So hundreds of stone circles in South Africa that emit different sound waves and emit different levels of energy based on the spot where these stone circles were created. I think there's no coincidence that you find the quantity of circles with the different frequencies in South Africa, because this is where we find the oldest gold mines, some dating back at a speculated 100,000 years ago. I know that number sounds absurd, but you do the homework, and when you see that and put 1 and 2 together, you go, wait a minute. You can control a population of people and get them to mine gold day after day and build structures day after day because you have the frequencies to speak directly to their minds and place thoughts in their head that will get them to do the work without revolting. Yes, my friends, our ancient ancestors may have been living in their version of the Matrix, and it was all being run by a Earth supercomputer by people we call the gods. And there may not have been just one group of gods. Michael Tellinger reacts to my question around the Earth supercomputer and responds with there may have been more than one set of gods with competing agendas. Listen in.
So my first question is around ancient technologies. I have been doing a little bit of research and looking at all the different sites, and you mentioned here the power of those circles. And I stepped back from it and realized that the Great Pyramids in Egypt and the Great Pyramids in Mexico, and I'm not the first to discover this, they look like motherboards.
Yes.
It made me want to ask the question, were the ancients trying to turn the planet into a supercomputer?
It's quite possible.
Because when I look at sites like yours that produce so much energy, and others that have different functions, they look like the Great Pyramid and the Great Pyramids in Mexico with two different sides of the computer bus on the motherboard.
Now keep in mind that these giant circuit boards are on bedrock.
Right.
Bedrock is just more quartz.
Exactly.
So it just the Earth is a giant supercomputer. It's conscious.
Right.
And these giant circuit boards are possibly just like what do you call them? These needles, acupuncture points that have a specific effect on the Earth, possibly negative effects, possibly maybe neutralizing certain aspects of the conscious Earth. Who knows? At this stage, it's new knowledge that we need to figure out what the hell they were doing.
Because my working theory is that if you could harness that and turn the planet into an active computer, you could use sites like what you see in South Africa to emit frequencies that would essentially control the brain.
Yes.
And make people do things that they don't know they're doing, which is stuff that DARPA's experimenting with right now. And I wondered if ancient civilizations that wanted to control man may have used the planet in that way. Because I think about those crystal caves being the storage capacity for the planet. The pyramid complexes being certain types of functions to either control the peripheries, as you do on some computers, or control access to the memory. And the Great Pyramids at Egypt had the structures and had the obelisk, which would push information and energy into the ground, which would be collected in certain caves. So I started thinking that this whole planet may have been a series of megalithic structures that were an ancient computer.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. But the question is, to what purpose?
To what purpose?
To what purpose? And again, keep in mind that some of these beings were doing that. Other beings were doing very different things.
Right.
Doing the opposite of that. Somebody came and destroyed all these structures.
Right.
We could ask, who destroyed all these structures?
Right.
And why did they destroy them? Because just to destroy them takes a lot of knowledge and effort and energy.
Right.
These things are huge megalithic structures, and they've been decimated.
Right.
My God, that took a lot of power.
Right.
Who did that?
Exactly.
So
that's the same question I'm asking, because I think my working theory is that these things were built and incorporated into some of our books, our religions.
Yeah.
And it may have been connected to something like the building of the Tower of Babel.
Yeah.
When you get to the point where you can control and harness the energy of a planet and build a gateway to the gods, that's when the gods got to come back and say this all has to be pushed back a bit.
If they can do that, they can become like us.
Right. So that's my working theory.
Yeah.
Are you guys starting to get it yet? Are you starting to see that there's a competition in heaven for our consciousness, for our vibrations, for the frequency that will dominate who we are, for the patterns that we can generate that connect consciousness throughout the universe, that's the real battle? And that there are those out there who know that now and that are using that against us to turn us into slaves, to rob us of the existence that God had intended. They tried it in ancient times with ancient artificial intelligence, and now they're going to do it again. And some of you still don't believe that we have the kind of technology that can use vibrations to push thoughts directly into your head and make you believe a different reality. But if you won't believe me, why don't you just listen directly to the source? LRAD CEO Woody Norris describes his company's new technology, Voice of God, sonic weapon. Yeah, you heard me. This is a 2007 clip of Woody Norris explaining his company's weapon that he's selling to the military and to DARPA, called the Voice of God.
The question is, where is the sound made? Instead of being made on the face of the cone, it's made at literally billions of little independent points along this narrow column in the air. And so when I aim it towards you, what you hear is made right next to your ears. I said we can shorten the column. We can spread it out to cover the couch. I can put it so that one ear hears one speaker, the other ear hears the other. Because the sound is made in the air along this column, it does not follow the inverse square law, which says it drops off about 2/3 every time you double the distance. 6 dB every time you go from 1 meter, for instance, to 2 meters. That means you go to a rock concert or a symphony, and the guy in the front row gets the same level as the guy in the back row now, all of a sudden. So again, this idea of being able to put sound anywhere you want to is really starting to catch on. It also works for transmitting and communicating data. It also works 5 times better underwater. We've got the military had just deployed some of these into Iraq, where you can put fake troop movements a quarter of a mile away on a hillside. Or you can whisper in the ear of a supposed terrorist some biblical verse. I'm serious. And they have these infrared devices that can look at their countenance and see a fraction of a degree Kelvin in temperature shift from 100 yards away when they play this thing. And so another way of hopefully determining who's friendly and who isn't. We make a version of this which puts out 155 decibels. Pain is 120. So it allows you to go nearly a mile away and communicate with people, and there can be a public beach just off to the side and they don't even know it's turned on. We sell those to the military presently for about $70,000, and they're buying them as fast as we can make them.
So Woody Norris, CEO of LRAD, is telling you in 2007 they could put thoughts in your brain. I'm sure today they can take sound vibrations and put images in your brain. Make you see what's not there. Give you a reality that's not a real reality. Turn you into a human robot, or as Woody Nelson said, make you hear the voice of God. You see why the sheep must know the voice of his shepherd? Because there will be a time when you will not be able to tell the difference. Because man is pushing down the road to become God, to recreate the sounds of God, to claim the minds of men and women using the construct that was used to give us the empathy to create a better reality. They're using that construct as a way to control and keep us from achieving it. It's also the reason why I believe, as I said in the previous 2 episodes, why we see so much pain and suffering. You see, the Hindu, as well as those who practice yoga, know that the meditative state is the key to locking in on that 432 hertz. It's that part of the practice in yoga where you're saying the ohms that's connecting you to the universe. What's the best way to never let you get that meditative state? Is to keep you in constant mental shock. Opening your mind to the negative frequencies that Michael Tellinger mentioned in that short clip, to control you, to guide you down the wrong path. I know many of you look at what we're seeing in this country, the violence, and asking, how could so many people condone it, support it, and not stand up against it? They're locked into these frequencies and don't even know the realities that are being imposed into their minds as valid realities, because they're not allowing their soul to connect to the universe. When you do connect to the universe, you no longer act like a PC that stores everything locally. You connect to the cloud and share an empathetic connection with the rest of all existence, achieving superposition. So why would you destroy what is you if you're connected to it? You only feel that way when you achieve the awareness state, the awareness of self, by accepting the false notions of scarcity, of fear, hatred. That's why it's important to know these lessons and to know what's coming, so you know the voice of God. Guys, that's all I got for part 1. And I think that's a lot. I rest my case until the next episode, where we pick up with part 2, Who is God, and come at it from a completely different angle. But before we get out of here, I want to tap into a little bit of that empathy that we talked about earlier. I'm teaming up with Airbnb Open Homes, a program that enables community members to offer free temporary housing to people displaced by disasters. During disasters such as Tropical Storm Barry that hit Louisiana, one of our greatest needs is to make sure every resident has a safe place to stay. With hurricane season right on top of us, the time is now to prepare. If you are able to offer free temporary housing for neighbors impacted by disasters, please sign up to be an open home host by going to airbnb.com/mpeterson. That's airbnb.com/M as in Mary, PETERSON, all one word. You'll only be contacted when there is a need. This will add a great tool to our community's disaster response toolbox. Guys, I went through a case of kombucha for this episode, and I appreciate you listening in. If you like what you heard, hit subscribe, leave a comment, share it with a friend, but absolutely under no circumstances do you share it with my priest, right? I like the front pew, and I don't want to be forced to sit in the back because of what I've been saying on this podcast. But I'm not going to stop, because all I'm doing is asking questions and getting you to go along on the ride with me. As they said in The Matrix, I can only offer you the truth, nothing more. Peace, guys. Till next time.